like most other organizations, our vision primarily has to focus on the strength and the durability of the Kansas City Jewish community. Our focus is primarily local, and our focus is also on the sustainability of that foundation as we work on the education and development of the next generation of givers in the community, and the growth and development and the maintenance of financial resources that help sustain the community into the future.
So you mentioned the word sustainability. Has the pandemic changed that vision in any fundamental way, either in the short or the long term?
Well, it hasn't changed vision. That certainly remains a long-term vision. We have addressed our concerns about making sure that in the short term that our Jewish agencies and congregations make it through what is a challenge to all of us, to all institutions, a challenge that has really sort of upended in certain ways how we all do business. It's been very challenging for all those organizations to plan. It has been challenging for all organizations to fundraise in their traditional manners. And so that has affected the financial situation for a lot of the organizations. In terms of stability, I think thankfully, our organizations have proven to be incredibly robust and resilient and adaptable. And so I think that we should be very, very proud of how we've weathered this situation so far. And that's been in part because of great leadership that we have throughout the community. And also, I have to say, because we have at the foundation, I think, done a good job of seeing that there have been resources that have been available and steadied a lot of organizations through this crisis.
So there's always a lot of talk about Jewish Community Foundation in the good way under your leadership. And if you would tell us a little bit in more detail about the funding mechanisms that JCF offers, and how they differ one to the other.
Sure. Well, if I could describe sort of some of the unique qualities of Jewish Community Foundation among the other community funders such as Federation and Menorah, I would say we are a direct service provider. We provide philanthropic advising and education to individuals, families, and nonprofits. And again, as I said, we administer over 1,500 separate funds. We could talk a little bit about some of the programs a little bit later. We don't raise money for our own operations, but rather we build and administer funds for other community nonprofits. And our mission, as I said, is to advocate for planned giving. So we are building resources that are giving for future use, whether that's for next week or next year or next decade, and especially working on those gifts that have tax or estate planning consequences. And many of those resources come to us as legacy gifts at the time of someone's death or in memory of someone. Our primary focus is on donor-centered giving, where the individuals and the family units are the decision makers concerning where the charitable dollars go. And as a result, relative to other community funders, our board has a small number of unrestricted dollars available to distribute. We do that through a committee of our board that's called the Grants Committee. And we run a couple of different grant cycles throughout the year, primarily focusing on funding the core operations of community agencies and addressing emergent needs as well as innovative programs. That said, the totality of all the funds that are under our umbrella and funds that are distributed on an annual basis is the largest of all the funders. Last year, for example, more than $18 million was distributed overwhelmingly to local organizations and congregations. So our constituents, whether, excuse me, they be individuals or organizations themselves, really power the foundation. And our board has a strong role in oversight to make sure that donor intent is maintained and that the funds that are entrusted to the foundation are safe and secure.
So tell us a little bit, what's the difference between a donor advised fund, a family foundation, a general endowment fund? I know there's been in a number of years a big push towards donor advised funds. You had a very successful endowment legacy campaign a number of years ago, the Bushman legacy campaign. What are the difference between all of these things? I mean, can anybody just participate with JCF?
Well, I'll answer the last part first. Definitely. We accept contributions into foundation funds of any size. So you don't have to have a specific fund that you yourself are advising in order to make a contribution to a foundation fund. Now, that said, I can talk about the donor advised fund program first, since you mentioned that, and certainly that I think is in a lot of people's minds sort of the way that we distinguish ourselves. Donor advised funds are funds that individuals or sometimes families establish to support the charitable organizations that they choose. They put money in, whether it's cash or stock, or in some cases, complex assets, which is one of the things that the foundation is known for, its ability to accept complex assets like non-publicly traded stock or real estate, for example. And they can then make decisions about where those funds go at the time of their choosing. So they put money in, and then over time, that money gets distributed out. They have what's called the privilege of recommendation that can be then shared with someone else or used to include future generations of their families or friends, whomever they designate as a successor advisor to make those recommendations on a going forward basis. So it's a tax-wise way of creating sort of a charitable savings account that they can draw on at any time in the future. There are also tools that are called supporting foundations, and they kind of are stand-in for what a lot of people think of as family foundations, which in some contexts are private foundations. In the context of Jewish Community Foundation, these supporting foundations are associated with Jewish Community Foundation in order to be considered public charities. And there are all kinds of tax advantages to doing so. And those supporting foundations have their own boards of directors, which are generally comprised of family members from the founding family, and sometimes multiple generations of those families, which is one of the unique and fun and cool features, as well as members of the board that are designated foundation board members, that are individuals who have been approved by Jewish community foundations to sit on those boards. And they generally have a competitive grant cycle, much like we do for the Community Legacy Fund that's overseen by our grants committee. In addition, there are restricted funds that are funds that individuals create to benefit a particular organization or a program. And many of those funds are established during people's lifetimes, but they also can be established through people's estate plans, otherwise known as legacy gifts. And some of those funds are available to be spent out entirely, and some of them are established as endowment funds, which some people refer to as permanent funds, to create sustaining support for future generations after the person's gone. And I know the Federation has many of those funds, and those funds provide very important support that help provide a floor of financial support for a lot of Jewish communal organizations through the foundation. And
So
then in addition, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so I know that your relationships are so fundamental to what you do. I'm just curious, have these conversations with agencies or with donor families changed since the pandemic?
Well, yes, of course, by definition, we are, not by definition, but because of our concern for everyone's safety, we are operating and have been since March in a remote capacity. We are fully functional. All of our staff have setups like I do, offices at home, and all of our movements of financial decision making and the money itself has been going on as usual, uninterrupted, thank God. But not having the physical presence of people is definitely altered. One of the things that we all at the staff of the Jewish Community Foundation like best, which is those relationships. But we've adapted. And I think as this has gone on, people's comfort level in dealing in virtual forums like Zoom and others has grown. And so we have been conducting our business using those virtual platforms, holding events, having family meetings, supporting foundation meetings, one-on-one conversations with donors, fund holders, prospective donors, even our youth philanthropy program, which has a leadership council, has conducted its own meetings over Zoom. And so while we long for and miss the warm feeling of connectedness that we get from being in people's physical presence, I think that we have been able to adjust and adapt in ways that maintain that connection. I found that telephone calls, I don't know if you've experienced this, but people are really enjoying telephone calls in a way that I think they haven't in many, many, many years. And especially in those first weeks, the sound of familiar voices, just reaching out to find out how people were doing, completely aside from any foundation business, was very, very meaningful to them. And so, you know, we adapt. We're resilient people, and I think that we have done about as good a job as we could have under the circumstances. And but I sure will be happy to get back into a setting that's, you know, a physical in the physical presence of other people. You talked about this before. I get my energy from being around other people. In this crazy business in the Jewish world, we do a lot of hugging, and I miss the embrace of my fund advisors, donors, prospects, board members, even staff, even. So I'm looking forward to getting back into the office.
Yeah, we're in the same boat, exactly. I also get my energy from really seeing people and being with people, and certainly our fundraising, although we've done very well, the challenge of just not seeing people and being able to hug them is just a big loss, and have those conversations. Do you have a sense that there'll be a long-term impact on how we raise money and fund community programs and services?
Because of COVID?
Yes.
Well, in the former case for fundraising, I think that all kinds of convening will be permanently altered, and I think in a good way. We have been spending a lot of time thinking about silver linings of the COVID crisis, and there are some specific ones relative to foundations. I already mentioned that you know, the communities that have strong foundations, community foundations, and have developed good, strong basis of restricted funds, unrestricted funds, endowment funds, have fared better and always will fare better in a crisis, and our community is no exception. I think that in terms of legacy fund development, people are thinking more about their mortality because they're hearing about people being, sick and dying. And this last week has been some big illustration of that. And so I think that people are more mindful that life is fragile and you don't know. And now is the time to plan. Now is the time to have those conversations with your family members about what's important to you. People are being more intentional about meeting with their families. Weirdly, I think I have had more Shabbat dinners with my adult children since COVID than I did, well, not when they were living with me, but since they otherwise have been out of the house. And so, that's a silver lining, and that's a context in which conversations about giving can take place. I think that we've had the opportunity, as I'm sure you have, of engaging some people who formerly lived in Kansas City, who are snowbirds, or who may have moved permanently out of town, but still have that connection to Kansas City and still feel like they would like to support Kansas City organizations. And we've been able to include them and engage them in a way, because everybody's Zooming, that we hadn't before. And people who don't drive at night, people who have very, very busy work schedules, they're all much more available to meet and to attend things. And so our attendance in these virtual forums has actually been greater than the in-person ones. And so I imagine over the long term, we will be doing many things in a hybrid format, so that people who, for whatever reason, can't or don't feel comfortable meeting in person are able to participate. And so I think that's a wonderful long-term impact, and an impact that will improve fundraising for nonprofit organizations in the long run.
I hear you. I hear you. There are silver linings, as difficult as this is. I want to turn a little bit to the fact of our relationship, meaning Federation and JCF. Our relationship was instant because when I came here to interview, obviously you heard in my accent that I came from Philadelphia, and you do as well. And the funny thing is that I went to school with your first cousin. So we had an automatic relationship going. I felt comfortable. But what I was really surprised to hear, because this isn't always the norm, is that the Federation and the Foundation had such a close working relationship. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that's unique about Jewish Community Foundation in Kansas City is that we were incorporated as a separate entity back at the day of creation. And so we have always been an independent organization. In some communities, that's not the case. In most communities, that was not the case. And still in most communities, the function of the foundation is done by a department within the Federation. And unfortunately, in some of those settings, there hasn't been a great relationship, or a great, well, I'll use the term relationship, between the foundation function, the Federation function, and eventually the foundation function left or was spin off from the Federation. So in those circumstances, they didn't always happen under the best circumstance, and sometimes there's ill feelings. We don't have that because that's not in our history. And so we have been able to grow and develop as two separate organizations with clear defined missions that have evolved in a way that's been very complementary and not competitive. And so we wish for the other organization to be successful because that strengthens the other as well as strengthens the community. I think that it's always been a value that I've perceived among the boards of the two organizations, that there has been a constructive relationship between the two organizations. We, without breaching the confidentiality of our donor base, which is one of our highest values at Jewish Community Foundation. We are able to talk about problems in the community, about strategies that Federation and other organizations might pursue to make them more effective in fundraising. And so we're constantly communicating between the two organizations. We meet fairly regularly. We try to partner when that makes sense for both organizations. And we've done that in the area of raising charitable children and a number of other things where we share an interest in engagement and education of the next generation. But I do think that it comes down to a commitment among leadership to make the relationships work and make them work in productive ways. And that, as you've always advocated, that starts with effective communication. So some of it has to do with just you or me picking up the phone and saying, look, this is going on. This doesn't feel right to me. Let's talk it out before it gets away from us. And I think that that's always effective in our experience. And I mean, I think that, well, I'll just reiterate. I think that it starts with a commitment to come from a place of collaboration and build that trust over time. And that needs to be practiced. And I think that we practice it because we try to stay engaged with one another. And I look forward to continuing that partnership. I think that everyone benefits. We don't have to expend energy fighting with one another or creating obstacles for one another, and we can devote all of that energy to making the two organizations as successful as they possibly can be, all for the benefit of our community. And so I'm very grateful for that, and I thank you. Thank you.
And you know, it's wonderful because not only do we have wonderful professional relationships, but our lay relationships. I mean, we share different people on the boards, and I really think because all of that works so well together makes us very effective, and it is an unusual situation, and I'm thrilled to be part of it. Tell us a little bit about the programs, because you also do programs.
Right. Yes. Well, our programs are really focused on that education piece, which is an important overlay of, you know, we develop funds, we invest them for different organizations, we administer all these different funds, and then we oversee the process when the money goes out to making sure that it meets all of the rules and laws, that meets donor intent, and flows accurately out of our building. But overlay all of that is the philanthropy education, which is very, very important to us. And it starts very young, and it starts in the household. And so we do programming in the areas of multi-generational giving, where there are multi-generations involved in making decisions in families. And we also have programs that are addressed to the B'nai Mitzvah age group. And many people are aware of our B'nai Mitzvah program that's called B'nai Tzedek. We have hundreds and hundreds of teens and young adults that have been involved in this wonderful program that starts really in the year before Bar Mitzvah, Bat Mitzvah, where people are encouraged with a small family contribution, which then is matched by, I think, a 2-to-1 margin by the Jewish Community Foundation, so that each individual B'nai Mitzvah can have their own account where they are making charitable grants out to Jewish organizations, primarily in this area, so that they can practice inquiring about what the community needs are, getting to know our local organizations and what their functions are, getting to see what looks like it's an effective organization and an effective program, which is very important to us, and just in general, feeling like they're part of something bigger than themselves, for which they have a responsibility, and the engagement in which is a source of joy for them. And that goes from age 12 in some cases all the way through college age. The next program that we have as part of what we refer to as our continuum of giving, for some reason it's hard to say today, is called J-Lead, which is basically targeted at people in their later 20s, 30s, and even early 40s, where they're making a contribution of $500 into a pool of funds, and collectively are making decisions about where that money should go within the Jewish community again. Jewish Community Foundation staffs that for them, supports their grant making process, and also has historically given additional supplemental funds to their pot of money to enhance their giving. And that gives them some practice, again, in evaluating grants, in negotiating with one another with respect to where they think that the money should go ultimately, and helps sow the seeds for that beginning next cohort of community leaders who are responsible for developing and maintaining financial resources for the community. So those are two of them. And then, of course, maybe our best known program is the progression from the Bushman Community Endowment Initiative, which you had made reference to, which is an incredibly successful community-wide effort to build endowment funds, long-term sustainability funds, through legacy giving. We began that program in 2008. It went through many years and a number of iterations, and it now has sort of morphed into our Create a Jewish Legacy program, which continues to support the development, the maintenance, the stewardship of legacy gifts throughout the Jewish community in Kansas City, and runs a number of training programs on an ongoing basis, so that the new leadership that comes into organizations and congregations gets exposed to the same great information and creative ideas that we have. And those trainings occur throughout the year, as well as every other year. We conduct either a community-wide recognition of these gifts in an event called the Foundation of Our Future. And in the alternate years, we have a Legacy Giving Day of learning, where we're working on training, again, of fundraisers in the Jewish community, and also do education with important partners, the Jewish Community Foundation, which are the professional advisor community, and which include people's estate lawyers, their financial planners, money managers, sometimes stockbrokers, who we also have an important partnership with. We also sponsor a program, which is another recognition of legacy giving, that's called the Book of Life, which is a beautiful book. There's a physical book that individuals who have made legacy gifts to the community sign, with a statement of what has motivated them to give a legacy gift. The book is available. It's usually on display at the campus. The whole donor recognition area on campus is under construction, and we hope that as soon as people are back in the building, they'll be able to see the new beautiful donor recognition area that we have right across from the guard's desk in the front of the campus, where the book is on display. But meanwhile, you can go onto our website, jcfkc.org, and take a look at the Book of Life and see what it looks like there. So all of these programs clearly, and they really range over the lifespan. We're talking to young children all the way through people who are working on their estate plans. And each of them is meant to make sure that we have an educated, engaged group of Jewish communal members who understand and appreciate the importance of charitable giving, and how we really, really wouldn't have the beautiful community that we have without that.
Well, thank you, Lauren. This has been exciting. It's been thorough. It's been informative. I just need to commend you and your staff on the quality of the programs that you do, the work that you do, the work of your board. It's been a pleasure being the secretary on your board, and I look forward to my continued involvement as well. And just thanks a lot.
Well,
Appreciate
thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, before we go away, I want to give a special shout out to our staff. You know, our staff is the beating heart of Jewish Community Foundation, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. They work together beautifully. They each have their own individual talents. We have a staff that has lots of longevity, more than 11 years on average, which has been part, I think, of our working well together, and working with your staff too, which has also been a pleasure. So thank you.
And thank you for your leadership. I want to thank each one of you for joining us today. I hope this was informative for you. And I want to wish you Chag Sameach. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.